The universe is old, ancient beyond measure, filled with civilizations that rose and fell before Earth's sun ignited its first fusion reaction. Empires spanning thousands of star systems had warred, traded, and died across the cosmic void, while humanity was still learning to chip stone into crude tools.
The Vorith Dominion was one such empire, perhaps the greatest the galaxy had ever known.
For 11,000 standard cycles, the Vorath had ruled their sector with an iron talon. Their ships darkened the stars wherever they traveled. Their armies had crushed 17 spacefaring species into extinction and subjugated another 43 into servitude. The Vorath were apex predators in every sense. 3 meters of scaled muscle, 4 arms ending in razor-sharp claws, and a brain evolved for conquest and cruelty.
They feared nothing. They respected no one.
And on the day that changed everything, High Commander Kethfor stood on the bridge of his dreadnought, the Eternal Dominance, watching a tiny blue-green world spin slowly in the void.
"Is this the target?" he rumbled, his voice like grinding stone.
Sub-Commander Drethel consulted the tactical display hovering before him. Yes, High Commander. Human designation Epsilon 7. Population approximately 12,000. Mining colony. Minimal defensive capabilities.
Humans. Kethfor said the word like it left a bad taste in his secondary mouth. The newcomers.
Indeed. They emerged into interstellar space approximately 200 of their years ago. They have established 73 colonies across 14 star systems. Their military is negligible.
Kethfor studied the planet below. His tactical mind, honed by centuries of warfare, found it almost insulting. The humans had established themselves on this mineral-rich world at the very edge of Dominion space, apparently unaware, or uncaring, that they were building on territory the Vorath had long considered theirs by right of conquest.
What do we know of these humans? Kethfor asked.
Drethel pulled up a holographic display. It showed bipedal creatures, disturbingly fragile in appearance, soft skin, no natural armor, no claws, no venomous spurs. They stood barely half the height of a Vorath warrior.
Unremarkable, High Commander. Class 3 endurance, Class 2 strength, Class 4 reflexes. They possess no natural weapons worth mentioning. Their technology is functional but primitive compared to Dominion standards. They have never fought a major interstellar war.
Then why do some of our trading partners speak of them with such caution?
Drethal hesitated. It was barely perceptible, a slight flicker of his secondary eyelids, but Kethfor noticed it.
There are rumors, High Commander. Unsubstantiated. The Kethmari claim that humans are dangerous, that they should not be provoked. But the Kethmari are weak. They see threats in shadows.
And the Celestial Collective? They have far more contact with humans.
The Collective has declined to share intelligence on humanity. They claim neutrality.
Kethvor's mandibles clicked in amusement. The Celestial Collective, those ancient machine beings who had watched empires rise and fall for millions of years, rarely bothered with the affairs of organic species. Their silence on the matter of humans was curious, but hardly concerning.
Then we shall gather our own intelligence, Kethfor decided, through conquest. Deploy the assault fleet. I want that colony under Dominion control within 3 planetary rotations. And the humans themselves? Kill any who resist. Enslave the rest. They will serve as labor in our mines, as all inferior species do.
Drethel bowed his massive head. By your command, High Commander. Below, on the surface of Epsilon 7, Sarah Chen had no idea that her world was about to end. She was 34 years old, a mining engineer who had left Earth for the promise of adventure and purpose on the frontier. Epsilon 7 wasn't much to look at, a rocky world with a thin atmosphere, requiring sealed habitats and environmental suits for surface work, but it was home. The mining colony of New Dawson had 12,000 souls,
most of them families who had come seeking opportunity away from Earth's crowded cities.
Sarah's morning had been normal. Wake at 0600, coffee, real coffee, grown in the colony's hydroponic bays. Kiss her wife Maria goodbye. Take the transport to mining site Alpha, where she supervised the extraction of the rare minerals that made Epsilon 7 valuable to the colonial economy.
She was 3 hours into her shift when the sky fell.
The first indication that something was wrong came from the orbital sensors. Sarah's comm unit crackled with an urgent message from colony administration.
All personnel, this is Director Hammond. We are detecting multiple unidentified vessels entering the system. All citizens are advised to remain calm. This is likely a first contact situation. Repeat, remain calm.
Sarah stopped her work and looked up, though she could see nothing through the reinforced dome of mining site Alpha but the reddish sky of Epsilon 7. Around her, other workers had paused, exchanging uncertain glances.
First contact? Muttered Jorge, one of her team leads. We've had first contact. The Kethmari traders, the collective envoys?
These aren't friendlies, Sarah said quietly. She didn't know how she knew, but something cold had settled in her stomach.
20 minutes later, the sky lit up with fire. The colonial defense grid, such as it was, consisted of 3 orbital defense platforms and a squadron of 12 patrol craft. They had been designed to deter pirates and smugglers, not to repel an invasion fleet. The Varath assault force numbered 47 warships, including 3 heavy cruisers and the dreadnought Eternal Dominance. The battle, such as it was, lasted 8 minutes.
Sarah watched on the emergency broadcast as the orbital platforms were reduced to expanding clouds of debris. The patrol craft, piloted by brave men and women she had shared drinks with at the colony's single bar, threw themselves against the invaders with desperate courage. They destroyed exactly 1 Vorath fighter before being annihilated to the last ship.
Then the bombardment began.
New Dawson was not a military target. It was a town. It had schools, a hospital, a community center where Sarah had danced at her wedding. It had playgrounds where children laughed and parks where families gathered for weekend picnics.
The Vorath did not care.
Plasma lances fell from the sky like the wrath of ancient gods. The atmospheric processors were the first to go, transforming into pillars of fire visible from orbit. Then the main power plant. Then the residential districts.
Sarah's comm unit screamed with voices, screams, pleas, desperate calls for help that went unanswered. She heard Director Hammond ordering an evacuation that would never happen. She heard parents calling for children. She heard her own voice calling Maria's name over and over, getting no response.
The mining site was 40 kilometers from New Dawson. Sarah and her team could only watch as their home burned.
Then the ground troops came. The Vorath infantry landed in assault pods, each one carrying 20 warriors in full battle armor. They hit the surface like metal rain, deploying with the brutal efficiency of an army that had practiced genocide on 17 worlds.
Sarah had never held a weapon in her life. None of her team had. They were miners, engineers, technicians, people who built things rather than destroyed them. When the Vorath troops approached mining site Alpha, they were utterly defenseless.
Everyone into the tunnels, Sarah ordered, her voice steadier than she felt. We can't fight them, but maybe we can hide.
They fled into the mines they had spent years carving into Epsilon 7's crust. Behind them, they heard the Vorath smashing through the mining dome, their guttural voices calling out in a language no human had ever heard.
43 people made it into the tunnels. Mining engineers, equipment operators, geologists, and support staff. They ran deeper and deeper into the darkness, following emergency lighting to the oldest sections of the mine, sections that had been abandoned when the best ore veins were exhausted.
Behind them, the Vorath followed.
High Commander Keth IV watched the conquest from his bridge with growing satisfaction. The battle had been laughably one-sided, the colony's defenses crushed with minimal effort. Already his troops were securing the surface installations and rounding up survivors for processing.
Casualty report, he demanded.
1 fighter lost to collision with human debris. 3 infantry wounded in surface operations. No fatalities.
Kethvor clicked his mandibles in what passed for a Vorath smile. As expected, these humans are no different from any other species we have conquered. Soft, weak, unprepared.
The colony's central settlement has been thoroughly pacified, Drethel reported. Preliminary estimates suggest 8,000 human casualties. Approximately 3,000 survivors have been captured for slave processing. The remainder are being hunted in various surface installations.
And their response? Have they called for help?
Their communication systems have been destroyed. However, we intercepted several distress signals before jamming was complete. The messages were directed toward their nearest colony, designated as Kepler-42. It is 6 standard light weeks distant.
6 weeks. Kethvor considered this. Time enough to secure this system completely before any response arrives. Not that it matters. What can these humans do? Send more patrol craft for us to destroy?
Unknown, High Commander. But I remind you that our intelligence on human military capability is limited.
Then we shall learn by doing, Kethvor declared. Continue pacification operations. I want every human on this planet accounted for within 3 rotations. Dead or enslaved, it makes no difference to me.
Deep in the mines, Sarah Chen counted her people. 43 had fled into the tunnels. Now, after a day of hiding in the darkness, listening to the Vorath hunters prowl above them, only 38 remained. 5 had been caught trying to access the emergency supply cache near the main entrance. Sarah had heard their screams through the rock.
The survivors huddled in an abandoned processing chamber, lit only by the pale glow of emergency handlights. They had managed to seal the main access tunnels with controlled demolition charges, standard safety equipment for any mining operation. But they all knew it was only a matter of time.
We can't stay here, Jorge said quietly. We have water from the underground reservoir, but food will run out in a week, and the Vorath will eventually find the secondary access points.
Then what do you suggest? Sarah asked. We can't fight them. We have no weapons, no armor, no training.
We have mining equipment, a voice said from the back.
Sarah turned to see who had spoken. It was a young woman, barely 20, with the calloused hands of a heavy equipment operator. Her name was Kim, and Sarah remembered that she had been one of the fastest learners in the orientation program.
Mining equipment, Sarah repeated. Industrial plasma cutters, demolition charges, rock drills, chemical explosives for clearing hard strata. Kim's eyes glittered in the dim light. We might not have guns, but we have things that could be adapted.
She's right, Jorge said slowly. I worked on a lunar mining platform before coming here. We used similar equipment. Always joked that a plasma cutter would make a hell of a weapon.
Sarah felt something stirring in her chest. It wasn't hope, not exactly. It was something harder, something cold. She thought of Maria. She thought of the playgrounds turning to ash. She thought of the screams in the dark.
They killed our families, she said quietly. They destroyed our home. They're hunting us like animals. She looked around at the faces of her people, scared, grief-stricken, but listening. We have 2 choices. We can hide here until they find us, and then we die or become slaves. Or we can fight.
Fight? Someone asked incredulously. Fight how? They have warships, armies.
They have all of that, Sarah agreed. But we have something they don't understand. We have nothing left to lose. She paused. And we have 20 kilometers of tunnels that we know better than anyone.
The silence stretched. Then, slowly, Kim nodded. I can modify the plasma cutters, she said. Strip off the safety limiters. They won't have range, but close up, they'll cut through anything.
I know where we stored the emergency demolition supplies, another voice added, enough high explosive to bring down half the mine.
The rock drills, Jorge said, his voice gaining strength. We could set them to autonomous mode, send them through the walls as distractions or as weapons.
Sarah looked at her people, miners, engineers, scientists, not soldiers.
But then again, she thought, humanity had never been soldiers. They had been prey once on the plains of Africa, hunted by bigger, faster, deadlier predators. They had learned to make tools. They had learned to make traps. They had learned that the smart survived where the strong fell.
Let's get to work, she said.
3 days after the invasion, the Vorath hunting parties began to disappear.
The first team to go dark was Squad 17, tasked with clearing the abandoned mining complex on the surface. They reported contact with human survivors, then silence. When reinforcements arrived, they found the squad, all 20 warriors, dead.
The bodies were creative.
Industrial plasma cutters had been rigged as tripwires, slicing through armored legs with surgical precision. Demolition charges had been buried beneath false floor panels, detonating when warriors stepped on pressure plates. Rock drills had been set to autonomous navigation, bursting through walls with their diamond-tipped heads spinning at 10,000 RPM.
And in the deepest chamber, the Vorath found a message scrawled on the wall in their own blood.
This is just the beginning.
What is this? High Commander Kethvor demanded, staring at the casualty report.
The humans in the mining complex have organized resistance, Drethel said carefully. They are using improvised weapons and the terrain to their advantage. We have lost 47 warriors in the past 2 planetary rotations.
47? To unarmed civilians? They are no longer unarmed, High Commander. They have converted their mining equipment into weapons of surprising effectiveness.
Kethvor's claws scraped against the deck as he clenched his fists. Then burn them out. Collapse the tunnels. I will not lose more warriors to vermin.
That would destroy the mining infrastructure, High Commander. The minerals in this complex are the primary value of the colony.
I don't care about minerals. I care about sending a message. Crush them!
Yes, High Commander.
But crushing them proved more difficult than Kethvor had anticipated.
The tunnels were a labyrinth designed by human engineers who had spent years learning every twist and turn. When Vorath's forces tried to advance, they found their paths blocked by cave-ins. When they tried to dig through, they triggered explosive traps. When they sent scouts ahead, those scouts never returned.
The humans had learned to fight.
Not like soldiers. They didn't have the training or equipment for that. But they fought like something older, something primal. They fought like the prey that turns on the predator, using every advantage the terrain could offer.
Plasma cutters became short-range death machines, wielded from hidden alcoves in the rock. Chemical explosives were suspended from the ceiling on tripwires. Industrial drills were modified with remote control systems, allowing them to be directed through walls at unsuspecting targets.
And the humans themselves proved harder to kill than their physiology suggested.
Wounded humans kept fighting. Dying humans took Vorath with them. And the ones who survived, they learned. They adapted. They got better at killing with every encounter.
On the 5th day, Sarah Chen led her first offensive action.
They had identified a Vorath supply depot near the main entrance of the mining complex, a temporary structure where the aliens stored their equipment and processed captured humans for transport. Intelligence from a brave young man named David, who had crawled through ventilation shafts to observe the enemy, indicated that 60 Vorath warriors guarded the depot at any given time.
Sarah's force numbered 31. They were exhausted, grieving, and armed with modified mining tools. By every logical measure, an attack was suicide.
They attacked anyway.
The operation began at 0300 local time, when the Vorath guards were between shift changes. Sarah's team had spent 2 days quietly boring a tunnel through solid rock, using the mine's acoustic dampening systems to mask the sound. They emerged in the depot's waste processing area, a location the Vorath had judged too unimportant to guard.
The first Vorath to die was a supply officer, caught alone in a storage corridor. Kim took him with a plasma cutter to the neck, severing his spinal column before he could raise the alarm. His body was hidden in a maintenance alcove.
The second and third died the same way, silent, quick, brutal. By the time the alarm was raised, Sarah's team had killed 11 Vorath and rigged the depot's central power system with enough explosives to level a city block.
"Fall back," Sarah ordered, and her team retreated into the tunnel they had come from. Behind them, plasma bolts scorched the air as Vorath warriors opened fire. 2 of her people fell, caught by enemy shots before they could reach cover.
Then the explosives detonated. The depot vanished in a pillar of fire that briefly rivaled the sun. The shockwave collapsed tunnels for a kilometer in every direction, burying the Vorath forces who had been pursuing the retreating humans. When the dust settled, 53 Vorath warriors were dead. Sarah had lost 2 more of her people. But for the first time since the invasion began, she felt something other than despair. She felt like fighting.
6 light weeks away, the distress signal from Epsilon 7 reached the human colony of Kepler-42.
The message was fragmentary, corrupted by the jamming attempts of the Vorath fleet, but enough had gotten through. Invasion, bombardment, thousands dead, survivors in need of immediate assistance.
Kepler-42 was a larger colony than Epsilon 7, with a population of 300,000 and a modest orbital defense capability. Its governor, Marcus Webb, convened an emergency session of the Colonial Council within hours of receiving the distress signal.
"We can send a relief force," Admiral Helena Vasquez said. She was the commander of Kepler-42's small defense fleet, 12 patrol craft and 2 frigates, but it will take 6 weeks to reach them, and if the attackers are still there.
Who attacked them? Councilmember Chen demanded. Pirates? Smugglers?
The signal mentions Vorath, Governor Webb said grimly. That name means nothing to me.
It should. The voice came from the back of the room, where a Kethmari trade attaché had been observing the meeting. The alien, a slight, 4-armed creature with iridescent scales, stepped forward, his normally calm demeanor replaced by visible agitation.
You know these Vorath? Webb asked.
Every species in this sector knows the Vorath, the Kethmari said. They are the Vorath Dominion, an empire 11,000 years old. They have conquered or destroyed 40 species. Their territory spans 80 star systems. Their military.
The attaché paused, as if struggling to find words.
Their military is the most powerful force in this region of space. A single Vorath battle fleet could destroy every human colony in existence.
The room fell silent.
Then we're lost, someone muttered.
Perhaps, the Kethmari said, but perhaps not. The Vorath have never encountered your species before. They do not know what humans are capable of. They do not understand. He trailed off.
Understand what? Admiral Vasquez pressed.
The Kethmari looked at her with his multifaceted eyes. There are rumors about your species, whispers among the trading consortiums and diplomatic councils. Even the Celestial Collective speaks of humanity with unusual interest.
Rumors? Webb asked.
That humans are not like other species. That there is something different about you. Something that even we cannot fully comprehend. The Kethmari's voice dropped. We have seen your history, the wars you have fought among yourselves, the things you have survived. The Vorath believe conquest is strength, but your species has shown that sometimes the conquered can become the conquerors.
We've never fought an interstellar war, Vasquez pointed out.
No. But you have fought wars that make our conflicts look like children's games. You have developed weapons that could sterilize worlds. You have killed yourselves by the billions and kept fighting. And then, somehow, you stopped. You unified. You came to the stars. The Kethmari spread his 4 arms. The Vorath see a young, weak species. I see something else. I see a species that has never truly been pushed to its limits. And I wonder what will happen when it is. Governor Webb sat in silence for a long moment. Then he stood.
"Send a message to Earth," he said. "Full priority. Tell them what has happened. And tell them," he paused, his jaw setting with determination, "tell them the time for hiding is over."
The message reached Earth 3 weeks later. By then, the news had spread across human space. Epsilon 7, 12,000 civilians, bombed without warning, invaded without mercy, massacred without cause. The images that survived, transmitted by the last functional communication satellite before its destruction, showed a thriving colony reduced to smoldering ruins. They showed bodies in the streets. They showed children's toys among the rubble.
Humanity had always known that the universe was dangerous. They had prepared for the possibility of hostile contact with cautious diplomacy and quiet strength. Their military was small by galactic standards, designed for defense rather than aggression.
But as the news of Epsilon 7 spread, something changed. On Earth, the United Human Confederation convened an emergency session of the General Assembly. Representatives from every human world attended, their faces grim and determined.
The debate was surprisingly short.
"We cannot allow this to stand," declared President Sarah Okonkwo, her voice carrying across the vast assembly hall. 12,000 of our people are dead. Thousands more are missing. A member world of the Confederation has been attacked without provocation, without declaration of war, without any attempt at communication. This is not diplomacy. This is extermination.
"What do you propose?" the representative from Mars asked.
Okonkwo turned to face the full assembly. "I propose that we show the Vorath Dominion what it means to attack humanity. I propose total mobilization of all Confederate military forces. I propose the construction of a fleet the likes of which this galaxy has never seen. And I propose that we take that fleet to Vorath space and teach them a lesson they will never forget."
That could take years, someone objected. What about the survivors on Epsilon 7?
A relief force is already being assembled. Admiral Chen will lead a rapid response squadron to the system within the month. They will evacuate survivors and gather intelligence on the enemy. But we will not stop there. Okonkwo's eyes blazed. We will build, we will train, we will prepare, and when we are ready, we will make the Vorath Dominion regret the day they ever heard the name humanity.
The vote was unanimous. The industrial might of human space turned to war.
Shipyards that had been building colony vessels were converted to military production. Mining operations across a dozen worlds increased output to feed hungry factories. Research facilities that had been devoted to peaceful exploration began developing weapon systems unlike anything humanity had ever created.
And the people responded. Recruitment offices were overwhelmed with volunteers. Scientists abandoned comfortable academic positions to work on weapons research. Engineers who had designed buildings and bridges began designing instruments of destruction. Veterans of Earth's last great war, old men and women who had thought their fighting days were over, came out of retirement to train the next generation. Humanity had been at peace for 2 centuries. They had put aside the martial traditions that had once made them the most dangerous species on their homeworld. But the knowledge was still there, buried in their history, in their cultural memory, in their very DNA.
Now that knowledge came roaring back.
3 months after the attack on Epsilon 7, the first ships of the Human Response Fleet entered the system.
Admiral Jennifer Chen, no relation to Sarah Chen on the surface, though they shared the same determination, commanded the fleet from the bridge of the heavy cruiser Defiant. Her fleet was small by the standards of what was being built back in human space, 24 warships, ranging from destroyers to the 3 heavy cruisers that formed the fleet's backbone.
It was not a fleet meant to win a war. It was a fleet meant to save lives and send a message.
"What's the situation?" Chen demanded as her ships decelerated into the system. "Vorath fleet is still in orbit around Epsilon 7, her tactical officer reported. 41 warships. They've established a defensive perimeter around the planet."
"Survivors?"
Unknown, but we're picking up something strange from the surface. Intermittent signals, encrypted using Confederate protocols.
They're alive, Chen said softly. Some of them, at least.
Admiral, the Vorath are Halenes.
Chen straightened in her command chair. Put them through.
The main view screen flickered, and the face of High Commander Kethvor filled the display. He was massive, terrifying, every inch the apex predator his species had evolved to be.
"Human vessel," he rumbled, "you have entered Vorath territory. Power down your weapons and surrender your ships. You will be granted mercy if you comply immediately."
Chen studied the alien's face. She saw arrogance there, contempt, the casual cruelty of a being who had never known defeat.
"I am Admiral Jennifer Chen of the United Human Confederation," she said calmly. "You have attacked a Confederate member world without provocation. You have murdered 12,000 civilians. You have committed acts of war against humanity."
Acts of war? Kethvor seemed genuinely amused. There can be no war between a true power and insects. Your colony was built on Dominion territory. Your people were trespassing. We have merely corrected that mistake.
"Then consider this our correction," Chen replied. "Withdraw from this system immediately. Release all prisoners. Pay reparations for the damage you have caused, and pray that we show you more mercy than you showed our people."
Kethvor's laughter echoed across the bridge. Mercy? Humans speaking of mercy. You are 24 ships against 41. You are children playing at war. I will destroy your fleet and add your bones to my trophy collection.
Chen smiled. It was not a pleasant expression.
Then come and take them.
The channel closed.
"All ships," Chen announced over the fleet-wide channel. "Battle stations. Today we teach the Vorath what it means to fight humanity."
The Battle of Epsilon 7 would be studied by military historians across the galaxy for centuries to come. By every measure, the humans should have lost. They were outnumbered almost 2-to-1. Their ships were smaller, their technology less advanced, their crews less experienced than the ancient warriors of the Vorath Dominion.
But the humans had something the Vorath didn't expect.
They had spent 3 months preparing.
While the Vorath had been hunting survivors on Epsilon 7's surface, human intelligence agencies had been working overtime. They had intercepted Vorath communications, analyzed captured equipment, studied every scrap of data they could find about the enemy.
And they had learned. Vorath ships were powerful but rigid. Their tactics were effective but predictable. They fought the same way they had fought for 11,000 years: overwhelming force, direct assault, crushing superiority.
They had never faced an opponent who fought differently.
The human fleet didn't charge head-on into the Vorath formation. Instead, they used the system's asteroid belt as cover, emerging to strike at enemy flanks before disappearing again. Their weapons were designed to exploit weaknesses in Vorath shielding that human scientists had identified through careful analysis. Their tactics were fluid, unpredictable, constantly adapting.
And their crews fought with a fury the Vorath had never encountered.
When the destroyer Vendetta was crippled by Vorath fire, her captain didn't surrender. She rammed her ship into the nearest Vorath cruiser, detonating her reactor at point-blank range. Both ships were destroyed. The Vorath lost a cruiser and 200 warriors. The humans lost 1 destroyer and 73 souls, who died knowing they were taking the enemy with them.
When the cruiser Justice was boarded by Vorath Marines, her crew didn't retreat to defensible positions. They counterattacked, armed with combat suits and weapons developed specifically for fighting armored Vorath in close quarters. The battle raged for 3 hours through the ship's corridors. When it was over, the Vorath boarding party had been wiped out to the last warrior. Justice survived, battered but unbowed. And when the Vorath dreadnought Eternal Dominance finally exposed itself to engage Admiral Chen's flagship, it found itself facing something unexpected.
The Defiant wasn't just a heavy cruiser. It was carrying a prototype weapon that human scientists had developed in secret, analyzing the fundamental principles of Vorath technology and designing a counter.
The Graviton Lance was a masterpiece of desperate engineering. It created a focused gravitational singularity that lasted for a fraction of a second, just long enough to tear through whatever was in its path.
Admiral Chen gave the order, and the lance fired.
The beam caught the Eternal Dominance amidships, tearing through its armor like it wasn't there. The dreadnought's spine snapped. Its reactor containment failed. In seconds, the mightiest warship in the Vorath fleet became an expanding cloud of plasma and debris.
High Commander Kethvor died without ever understanding what had killed him.
The battle lasted 6 hours. When it was over, 32 Vorath warships had been destroyed, including the Dreadnought. 9 more had been disabled. The survivors fled the system at maximum speed, leaving their ground forces stranded on Epsilon 7.
The humans had lost 11 ships and 2,000 sailors. They had paid a terrible price.
But they had won. On the surface, Sarah Chen watched the sky light up with the fires of battle.
For 3 months, she had led the resistance. 43 survivors had become 31, then 26, then incredibly had grown to over 200 as they rescued prisoners from Vorath holding camps and recruited survivors from other hiding places across the colony.
They had learned to fight. They had learned to kill. They had made the Vorath pay for every meter of ground in blood.
Now, as Vorath orbital support vanished in nuclear fire, they prepared for the final battle.
This is Admiral Chen of the United Human Confederation. A voice crackled over the emergency frequency. Epsilon 7 survivors, we have defeated the Vorath fleet. Ground forces are being deployed to secure the planet. Hold on. Help is coming.
Sarah felt tears streaming down her face. Around her, her people, her warriors, cheered.
"We held on," she whispered. "We held on." When the Marines arrived, they found something they didn't expect.
The Vorath garrison on Epsilon 7 had numbered 3,000 warriors. They had been equipped with the finest weapons and armor the Dominion could provide. They had been tasked with a simple mission: pacify the planet and enslave its population. Instead, they had found themselves in a nightmare.
The mines had become a fortress, a labyrinth of traps and ambushes that had claimed hundreds of Vorath lives. The human survivors had fought with improvised weapons and stolen equipment, turning every tunnel into a killing ground. When the Vorath tried to collapse the mines, the humans had simply dug deeper. When the Vorath tried to flood them with poison gas, the humans had sealed the tunnels and filtered the air through improvised scrubbers.
And when the Vorath ground forces tried to surrender, hoping to be evacuated by their fleet, they discovered that their fleet was gone.
The final battle was brief and brutal. Marine assault teams, backed by orbital bombardment, struck the remaining Vorath positions with overwhelming force. The aliens, demoralized and leaderless, fought with decreasing conviction.
By the end of the day, the last Vorath warrior on Epsilon 7 was dead.
Sarah Chen walked through the ruins of New Dawson, accompanied by Marine escorts who looked at her with something like awe.
She found the place where her home had stood. There was nothing left but scorched earth and twisted metal. She found the playground where she had imagined her future children would play. It was a crater now, a scar in the landscape.
She found Maria.
Her wife had died in the initial bombardment, killed when plasma fire struck the residential sector. Her body had been recovered 3 days later, identified by dental records.
Sarah knelt beside the grave that the Marines had dug, a simple mound of earth marked with a temporary marker.
"I'm sorry," she whispered. "I'm sorry I couldn't save you. I'm sorry I wasn't there."
The wind whispered across the scorched landscape, carrying the smell of ash and death.
"But I promise you this," Sarah continued, her voice hardening. "They will pay, every last one of them. For you, for the children, for everyone they murdered. They will pay."
She stood up, wiping her tears, and turned to face the Marine captain who had been waiting respectfully at a distance.
"Captain," she said, "I want to enlist."
The captain looked at her, this woman who had led a resistance movement against impossible odds, who had turned miners into warriors and survived 3 months of hell.
"Ma'am," he said, "I think the military would be lucky to have you." The Battle of Epsilon 7 was a shock to the Vorath Dominion.
For 11,000 years, they had been the undisputed masters of their region of space. They had crushed every opponent, absorbed every rival, destroyed every threat. The idea that a young, seemingly weak species could defeat a Vorath battle fleet was inconceivable. And yet it had happened.
The survivors of the fleet carried the news back to Vorath Prime, the homeworld of the Dominion. They told of human ships that fought with suicidal courage. They told of weapons that defied Vorath defenses. They told of warriors who refused to surrender, who kept fighting even when victory was impossible.
Supreme Overlord Vethkor, ruler of the Dominion, listened to these reports with growing fury.
"These humans have humiliated us," he growled to his war council. "They have destroyed our ships, killed our warriors, and defied our authority. This cannot stand."
"What do you propose, Supreme Overlord?" asked Grand Admiral Kethvor, the father of the slain High Commander. "Total war," Vethkor declared. "We will mobilize every fleet, every army, every weapon at our disposal. We will find the human homeworld and reduce it to ash. We will hunt their colonies across the stars and burn them one by one. We will not rest until the last human is dead and their very name is forgotten."
"That will take time," Grand Admiral Kethvor cautioned. "The humans have 73 colonies spread across 14 star systems, and they are clearly more capable than we anticipated."
"Then we will have more glorious battles," Vethkor said. "More opportunities to prove our superiority. The Dominion has not faced a true challenge in millennia. Perhaps these humans will provide one."
And if they prove more challenging than expected? Vethkor's eyes blazed with cold fire. "Then we will learn. We will adapt. We will overcome. It is what the Vorath have always done. It is what we will do now." The War Council bowed their heads in submission. The Vorath Dominion began mobilizing for total war.
But they were not the only ones. In human space, the industrial machine that had been awakened by Epsilon 7 continued to accelerate. Shipyards worked around the clock, producing warships at a rate that would have been unimaginable a year earlier. Research facilities churned out new weapons, new defensive systems, new technologies designed specifically to counter Vorath advantages.
And humanity itself transformed.
The Vorath saw humans as weak because they lacked natural weapons, natural armor, natural advantages. But what the Vorath didn't understand, what they couldn't understand, was that humanity's greatest weapon had always been their minds. Humans were toolmakers, problem solvers. They had conquered their homeworld not through strength, but through intelligence. They had survived ice ages and plagues and catastrophes that would have destroyed lesser species. They had invented agriculture, industry, nuclear physics, interstellar travel. And when necessary, they had invented war.
1 year after the Battle of Epsilon 7, the Second Fleet set out for Vorath space.
It was not a relief force. It was not a defensive operation. It was an invasion. Admiral Jennifer Chen, now promoted to Admiral of the Fleet, commanded from the bridge of the newly commissioned dreadnought Humanity's Answer. Her fleet numbered 300 warships, heavy cruisers, carriers, destroyers, and support vessels built for one purpose: to carry the war to the enemy.
"All ships," she announced over the fleet-wide channel, "we are approaching the border of Vorath space. Beyond this point, we are in enemy territory. Many of us will not return."
She paused, looking out at the stars.
But we do not fight for ourselves. We fight for the 12,000 souls who died on Epsilon 7. We fight for the children who never got to grow up, the parents who never got to see their children again, the families that were destroyed without warning or mercy. We fight because the Vorath chose to make us their enemies. Now we will show them what that means.
The fleet crossed into Vorath space. The first target was Vorath colony world Kethor, a mining planet similar to Epsilon 7, with a population of 50,000 Vorath civilians and a garrison of 10,000 warriors.
The Vorath expected the humans to attack the garrison directly. They had reinforced their defensive positions, fortified their orbital installations, prepared for a conventional assault. The humans did not attack conventionally. Instead of engaging the Vorath fleet head-on, Chen's forces deployed long-range missiles from the outer edges of the system. These missiles were not aimed at military targets. They were aimed at the planet's infrastructure, the atmospheric processors, the power plants, the communication arrays. Within hours, Kethor was cut off from the outside world. Its atmosphere was failing. Its power grid was collapsing. Its population was panicking. Then the human fleet approached.
This is Admiral Chen of the United Human Confederation, she broadcast on all frequencies. You have 1 hour to evacuate your garrison and your civilian population from this planet. Any ships that attempt to flee will be permitted to leave unmolested. Any ships that attempt to fight will be destroyed. After 1 hour, we will begin bombardment of all remaining surface installations.
The Vorath commander, a young officer named Drethal, son of the sub-commander who had died at Epsilon 7, was faced with an impossible choice: fight and die, or surrender and live.
The Vorath had never surrendered. It was not in their nature, not in their culture, not in their history. But Drethal looked at his shattered defenses, his panicking population, and the human fleet that waited with calm, implacable patience. He ordered the evacuation. The fall of Kethor sent shockwaves through the Dominion.
For the first time in 11,000 years, a Vorath world had fallen to an enemy. The Supreme Overlord was furious, but he was also beginning to understand something that his predecessors had never needed to learn.
The humans were not like other enemies. They did not fight fair. They did not fight by rules. They found weaknesses and exploited them with ruthless efficiency. They used tactics that the Vorath had never encountered, strategies that seemed to violate the very principles of honorable warfare. And they were yearning. Every battle, every engagement, every encounter was analyzed by human intelligence. Vorath weapons were studied. Vorath tactics were dissected. Vorath psychology was mapped and understood.
The humans were building a complete picture of their enemy, and they were using that picture to take the Vorath apart piece by piece.
Over the next 2 years, the war ground on.
The Vorath threw everything they had at the human advance. Grand Admiral Kethvor led the largest fleet the Dominion had assembled in 1,000 years. 500 warships, the combined might of a dozen sector fleets, in a desperate attempt to stop the human offensive.
The Battle of the Nexus, fought in the heart of Vorath territory, was the largest engagement in galactic history.
Admiral Chen's forces were outnumbered, outgunned, and fighting far from their supply lines. By every measure, they should have been destroyed.
Instead, they won.
The human fleet used the gravitational complexities of the Nexus, a region of space where 3 star systems overlapped, to negate the Vorath numerical advantage. They lured the enemy fleet into a trap, using decoy signals and false retreats to draw the Vorath into a killing zone where their superior numbers meant nothing.
Then the carriers launched their fighters.
Human fighters were small, fast, and numerous. The Vorath had never developed an effective counter to swarm tactics. Their doctrine emphasized big ships and overwhelming force. The fighters swarmed over the Vorath fleet like angry hornets, targeting weak points in their shields, overwhelming their point defense, and dying by the hundreds to take down enemy warships.
When it was over, the Vorath Grand Fleet had been shattered. Grand Admiral Kethvor was dead, his flagship destroyed by 3 nuclear-tipped torpedoes that penetrated its shield and detonated in its reactor core.
The road to Vorath Prime lay open. But Admiral Chen did not immediately press the attack.
Instead, she sent a message to the Supreme Overlord.
Your fleet is destroyed. Your colonies are falling one by one. Your empire is dying. But it does not have to end this way.
What do you propose? Vethkor demanded.
Surrender. Unconditional and complete. Disarm your fleets. Free your slave species. Accept human oversight of your territory. In exchange, we will spare your population. Your culture will survive. Your people will live.
You dare offer mercy to the Vorath. We are conquerors. We are the supreme species of this galaxy. We will never. You were conquerors, Chen interrupted. Now you are defeated. I am offering you a choice, Supreme Overlord. Surrender and live, or fight and die. The decision is yours.
Vethkor cut the gel.
He chose to fight.
The Battle of Vorath Prime was not a battle. It was an extinction.
The human fleet arrived with 600 warships, including 12 dreadnoughts and 40 carriers. They faced the last remnants of the Vorath military, 200 ships, hastily crewed by inexperienced officers and demoralized soldiers.
The battle lasted 4 hours. When it was over, Vorath Prime's orbitals were shattered, its fleet was debris, and its ground defenses were silent.
But Admiral Chen did not order the bombardment that the Vorath expected.
Instead, she broadcast a message to the planet below.
People of Vorath Prime, your government has refused to surrender. Your military has been destroyed. Your supreme overlord is dead.
Vethkor had died in the battle, his command bunker obliterated by a precision strike.
I now offer you the same choice I offered your overlord. Surrender and live, or resist and die. I have no desire to exterminate your species, but I will not allow the Vorath Dominion to threaten humanity again. The choice is yours.
For 3 days, the human fleet waited in orbit, while the Vorath below debated their fate.
On the 4th day, a new government emerged. A council of survivors representing the scattered remnants of Vorath society. They accepted the human terms.
The Vorath Dominion was no more.
The aftermath of the Vorath War transformed the galaxy.
The species that had been enslaved by the Dominion were freed. 43 civilizations that had known nothing but servitude for generations. They looked to humanity not with fear, but with gratitude, with awe, with something approaching worship.
The humans had done what no one else had ever accomplished. They had stood against the greatest empire in the galaxy and won.
But victory came with a price.
Humanity had lost 3 million people in the war. 3 million soldiers, sailors, pilots, and support personnel who had given their lives to defeat the Vorath. Thousands more had been wounded, traumatized, broken by the horrors of interstellar combat.
And humanity itself had changed. The peaceful civilization that had emerged from the ashes of Earth's last great war was gone. In its place was something harder, something colder, something that had looked into the abyss and emerged with blood on its hands.
The United Human Confederation reorganized itself into the United Human Federation, a new government designed for a galaxy that was far more dangerous than anyone had imagined. Military spending, once a fraction of the federal budget, became its largest component. Colonies that had focused on farming and mining now hosted military bases and research facilities.
And the children who grew up after the war learned a different lesson than their parents had.
They learned that the galaxy was not a friendly place. They learned that there were powers out there who would destroy humanity if given the chance. They learned that the only way to survive was to be stronger, faster, smarter,
and more ruthless than anyone else.
They learned to be warriors. 10 years after the war, Admiral Jennifer Chen retired to a quiet cottage on the shores of Lake Geneva. She had been offered the presidency. She had been offered a dozen other positions of power and prestige. She had refused them all.
She was tired. Tired of war, tired of killing, tired of the weight that had been on her shoulders since the day she first saw the wreckage of Epsilon 7.
She wanted peace. But the galaxy, it seemed, had other plans.
The message came on a quiet afternoon, delivered by a young lieutenant who had been born after the war and knew Admiral Chen only as a name in history books.
"Ma'am, you have a visitor. A non-human visitor." Chen looked up from the book she had been reading. "The war is over, Lieutenant. There are plenty of non-human visitors these days."
"This one is different, ma'am. They claim to represent the Celestial Collective."
Chen froze.
The Celestial Collective, the ancient machine beings who had watched empires rise and fall for millions of years. They had been notably silent during the Vorath War, declining to provide intelligence or assistance to either side.
Now they had come to her. "Send them in," she said.
The being that entered her cottage was unlike anything Chen had ever seen. It was humanoid in shape, but clearly artificial, a construct of metal and light that moved with fluid grace. Its face was a smooth, featureless mask that somehow conveyed intelligence and purpose.
Admiral Chen, it said, its voice resonating in ways that seemed to bypass her ears entirely. "We have come to speak with you."
"About what?"
"About the future. About the role your species will play in it. About the choices that lie ahead."
Chen set down her book. "The war is over. The Vorath are defeated. Humanity is secure. What choices are you talking about?"
The being was silent for a long moment. When it spoke again, its voice carried a weight that Chen had rarely encountered.
The Vorath Dominion was old, ancient by your standards, but in the span of galactic history, they were children. There are powers in this universe far older than the Dominion, far more powerful, and some of those powers are awakening.
"What do you mean?"
For millions of years, the Celestial Collective has watched. We have observed the rise and fall of civilizations. We have cataloged the birth and death of empires. And we have watched for something specific, something we have been waiting for.
"What?"
"A species that could survive what is coming."
Chen felt a chill run down her spine. What is coming?
We do not know, not precisely, but the patterns we have observed suggest that a great change is approaching, a crisis that will test every civilization in the galaxy. We have seen similar crises before. Every time, the dominant civilizations of the era were destroyed.
And you think humanity can survive?
We think humanity is the first species in 60 million years that has a chance. The being's featureless face somehow conveyed intensity. You are young, aggressive, adaptable. You took an empire that had ruled for 11,000 years and dismantled it in 3. You faced extinction and chose to fight. You are not like the others.
"We're just people," Chen said quietly. "We're not special."
You are entirely special, Admiral Chen. You come from a world that tried to kill you for millions of years. You evolved under constant pressure from predators, competitors, and environments that should have destroyed you. You learned to adapt. You learned to overcome. You learned that survival is not given, it is earned.
The being paused.
The powers that are awakening have destroyed civilizations that ruled for 1,000,000 years. They have erased species that considered themselves gods. But they have never faced something like humanity. They have never faced a species that refuses to die.
Chen stared at the machine being for a long moment.
What do you want from us?
We want to prepare you
to share knowledge that we have gathered over millions of years, to help you become what you need to be.
Which is?
The guardians of this galaxy. The species that will stand against the darkness when it comes. The light that will endure when all other lights go out.
Chen laughed, a harsh, bitter sound. You're talking to the wrong person. I'm retired. I spent my career killing people. I'm not a guardian. I'm a weapon.
You are what your species made you, the being replied calmly. And your species made you because it needed you. It will need you again, Admiral Chen. Not today, perhaps not for many years, but the darkness is coming. And when it arrives, humanity will need every weapon it has.
The being turned to leave, then paused at the door.
We chose you because you understand something that many of your people have forgotten. You understand that peace is not the absence of conflict. It is the presence of strength. It is the willingness to fight for what you believe in. It is the courage to face the darkness and refuse to yield.
And if I refuse?
You will not, because you are human, and humans, as we have observed, do not go quietly into the night. The being departed, leaving Chen alone with her thoughts. She sat in silence for a long time, watching the sunset over Lake Geneva. The war was over. The Vorath were defeated. Humanity was secure.
But somewhere out there, in the vast darkness between the stars, something was stirring. Something ancient. Something powerful. Something that had destroyed civilizations, that made the Vorath look like children playing with toys.
And the Celestial Collective, beings that had watched the rise and fall of empires for millions of years, had chosen humanity to stand against it. Chen didn't know whether to laugh or cry. She thought of Epsilon 7. She thought of the 12,000 civilians who had died there, murdered by aliens who saw them as insects. She thought of Sarah Chen and the miners who had fought back with plasma cutters and demolition charges. She thought of the crews of her ships who had thrown themselves against impossible odds and won. She thought of what it meant to be human. They were soft, weak, fragile. They had no natural weapons, no natural armor, no physical advantages over the countless other species that roamed the stars. But they had something else, something that no other species seemed to possess. They had the absolute refusal to accept defeat. When the universe said, "You cannot survive," humanity said, "Watch us." When empires tried to crush them, they rose up and crushed the empires instead. When the darkness came, they built lights to push it back. They were stubborn, defiant, impossible. They were human. Chen looked up at the stars, visible now as twilight deepened over the lake. "Whatever's out there," she said quietly, "whatever's coming, we'll be ready. Because that's what we do. We endure, we adapt, we overcome." She smiled, and for the first time in years, it felt genuine. "You wanted a fight? You'll get one. Because humanity doesn't go quietly. We never have, and we never will." Epilogue. The Legacy. 100 years after the Vorath War, the galaxy was a different place. The United Human Federation had grown into a sprawling empire, though they refused to call it that. 200 colony worlds, a population of 15 billion, and a military that was considered the finest in known space. But more than that, humanity had become something else, something new. They had become the protectors of the weak, the allies of the oppressed, the voice of those who had no voice. The former slave species of the Vorath Dominion had found in humanity not new masters, but true friends. Trade agreements and defensive pacts bound dozens of civilizations together in a network that had no parallel in galactic history. And humanity had changed in other ways too. They had learned from the Vorath War. They had learned that strength alone was not enough. that victory without wisdom was hollow, that power without purpose was meaningless.
They had built schools and universities on 100 worlds, sharing knowledge with anyone who sought it. They had established hospitals and research facilities that welcomed scientists from every species. They had created a new civilization, one that was strong enough to defend itself, but wise enough to know when not to fight.
And they had prepared. The warnings of the Celestial Collective had been taken seriously. Human scientists worked alongside the ancient machine beings, studying technologies and histories that spanned millions of years. Human soldiers trained for battles that might not come for centuries. Human engineers built ships and weapons and defenses that would be ready when they were needed. The darkness that the Collective had warned about was coming. Everyone knew it. The signs were there for those who knew how to read them. Strange disturbances at the edge of known space. Ancient installations awakening after eons of dormancy. Whispers and rumors of something stirring in the void between galaxies.
But humanity was ready. In a small garden on Earth, on the grounds of what had once been the United Nations headquarters, a statue stood. It depicted a woman in mining gear, holding a modified plasma cutter in one hand and a detonator in the other. Behind her stood a group of figures, miners, engineers, scientists, all with the same expression of determined defiance on their faces.
The plaque at the base of the statue read,
"In memory of the defenders of Epsilon 7. They were not soldiers. But when called, they fought.
They were not warriors, but when challenged, they won. They showed the galaxy what humanity is made of.
May we never forget."
Visitors came from across the Federation to see the statue. They came to pay their respects, to remember the sacrifice, to draw inspiration from those who had stood against impossible odds.
And they came to read the words that were inscribed on the back of the plaque, words that had been spoken by Admiral Jennifer Chen at the dedication ceremony 80 years earlier.
We are not the strongest species in the galaxy. We are not the oldest or the wisest or the most technologically advanced. But we are something that none of the others are. We are the species that never gives up. The species that fights when fighting is hopeless. The species that finds a way when no way exists. We are humanity, and we will never, ever go quietly into the night.
And somewhere in the vast darkness between the stars, something ancient stirred. It had slumbered for 1 billion years, dreaming of the civilizations it had consumed and the galaxies it had darkened. It was vast beyond comprehension, old beyond measurement, powerful beyond description. It had destroyed species that spanned millions of worlds. It had erased civilizations that had ruled for eons. It had never encountered anything that could resist its advance. It was beginning to awaken. And when it did, it would find something unexpected waiting for it. A species of soft, fragile beings who had emerged from a small blue world on the edge of an unremarkable galaxy. A species that had faced extinction more times than they could count and survived every single one. A species that had taken on an 11,000-year-old empire and won. A species that the Celestial Collective, beings who had watched the rise and fall of civilizations for 60 million years, believed might be the galaxy's only hope. Humanity. The darkness was coming, but so was the light. And for the first time in 1 billion years, the ancient darkness would face a species that refused to die. The Vorath had attacked a human outpost. They had woken the wrong species. And the galaxy would never be the same. The end.